Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alana. I play French horn. I asked you guys for your questions over on Instagram and there were a lot of them, so let's get started. There were a ton of questions on what type of horn I play. So this is the horn I play. I just have one horn. A lot of people have more than one horn for some reason. I just like having one. Oh. This is the Alex 1106, aka the Helden horn. It's basically Alexander's copy of like a traditional Geyer horn. It's got like the normal Geyer wrap. There are also a lot of questions about why I play on a European horn. I live in the US and I did some schooling in Canada, but for the most part, people in North America play these Geyer wrapped horns. Most of the time they're made by American horn makers. I would say for the most part, American horn makers make really great horns. When I was at Juilliard, there was a girl there who was from Europe and she had this horn and she sounded incredible. And I'm one of those people who really believes that it's not about the equipment that you play on, it's more about your sound as a horn player, like yourself, not necessarily your equipment. Her horn, it resonated so beautifully and it was so in tune and perfectly clear. The notes just slotted right into place and you could tell like it was very free blowing and easy to play. And I sat next to her a lot in orchestra and I always was like, I want to sound like that. We had the same teacher and everything, but I really just wanted to sound like her. Once I got to a point where I was like looking for horns, I just wanted to try the horn that she was playing on. I tried it and I absolutely fell in love with it. I personally don't feel like there's a huge difference between like an Alexander European made Geyer wrap and like an American made one. The only difference that I feel like would actually affect the quality of the horn is that Alexander has a factory with a lot of employees all checking different points of the work. So I feel like there maybe is like a little bit better quality control, but most American made horns are made by like just one guy in his workshop or like one guy with like a couple of employees in their workshop. So basically American made horns are typically like a much smaller production than Alexander. Alexander is probably the most popular brand that people play on in Europe and Asia. People seem to be picking these up more. I know like in New York City, a lot of the Met horns have picked this specific horn up. I live in LA and I've seen them play a lot of Alex 103s, which is kind of an interesting change. That's what they play mostly in Europe. So yeah, that's my horn. I also get a ton of questions on what mouthpiece I use. I have a bunch of different mouthpieces that I switch around between, but I've been using this one from Lasky. This is the 725G. This may be a hot take, but I believe that we all have different anatomy and not one mouthpiece is gonna fit every person. So I personally think the best course of action if you're looking for a new mouthpiece is to try a bunch and see what feels best on your mouth before purchasing it. Or if you can, buy a bunch of them and then return the ones you don't like. Trying a new mouthpiece always feels weird because your muscles aren't used to like the exact placement of where that new shape is on your mouth. But if it feels like your embouchure fits pretty well into the mouthpiece and you're not like spreading too much or you're not having to like really tighten up too much, then it's probably a good mouthpiece for you. Okay, Haley asks, what is one of your favorite pieces to play on the horn? That's a really hard question. If we're talking about orchestra pieces, I would say anything by Mahler, specifically Mahler 2 and Mahler 3 are both my favorite Mahler symphonies. Right now, it's Nutcracker season, and I think probably my favorite thing to play of all time is Nutcracker. I think I can chalk that up to childhood nostalgia because it was probably one of the first pieces I ever played with orchestra. I had a really weird youth orchestra experience. I joined when I was 14, so I was like a freshman in high school, and the youth orchestra I played with did really hard pieces. The first concert I played with them, they played Shostakovich 5. Every year they would play the Nutcracker Ballet with like the local ballet academy. I also watched a lot of Barbie Nutcracker when I was young, so every time I get called to play a Nutcracker, I'm super excited. In terms of like classical horn solos, I just really like playing Mozart 4. And of course we have film scores. Oh my gosh, there's so much. I think the Tron Legacy soundtrack is one of the greatest achievements of mankind. How does one find jobs as an orchestral instrument player? Is there a specific website? Yes, there are actually a few different websites where orchestras will post auditions. Musical Chairs is the first one. Then there's Last Row Music. Last Row Music is specifically for brass, but those are the two that I see most. There were actually a lot of questions about orchestra auditions, and I feel like that needs to be a separate video because it's a really confusing and long process for how people get hired into those positions. But basically, an orchestra will post that they have an audition in 4 to 6 weeks. They'll typically post like the repertoire that they need for the audition. Depending on the size of the orchestra, the list can be anywhere from like 5 to 6 excerpts long to, for like larger orchestras, it's 20 to 30 excerpts. And if you don't know what an excerpt is, it's like a really short portion of a part from an orchestra score. For example, there's a 2-minute long solo in Tchaik 5, and that's asked on like every principal horn audition. When you're in music school, you spend all 4 years trying to hone in on the most common excerpts. That's mostly what you're dedicating your time to when you're practicing and in lessons and stuff like that. What is your all-time favorite note to play on horn? Mine's A in the staff. That's actually fascinating because I think that's really common because A is played with your trigger 1-2 combination. The more fingers you press down, the more resistance there is on the horn. So sometimes it feels better to play notes that have more fingers down. So A is one of those notes that has a lot of resistance. So it just feels like the note just kind of, it's one of those feelings that's really hard to like put into words, but that's really common. My favorite note to play is D in the staff, which is also a trigger 1-2 combination. What video editing software do you use for reels, and do you edit the coloring? Thanks. I film on a Sony ZV-1 and I edit in Adobe Premiere Pro. I am terrible with lighting. I have only really warm lights right now, so I do color edit and I like crank the warmth down a little bit, but I still end up looking really orange. So I need to figure out my lighting. Should you play horn when you're sick? If you have a cold, for example? No. No, and the reason for that is you could like reinfect yourself. Basically, you're blowing into a tube so all the germs stay in the horn. There's a lot of back pressure when you're playing horn, so it kind of goes up into your head. And I feel like when you're sick, all that sinus pressure and like the back pressure from playing horn, it's probably not good for you. Is it better to start on single horn or double horn? That's a great question. I can only speak for myself. I started on single horn, and before that I started on trumpet. So I played trumpet for a whole year. When I was leaving 4th grade and going into 5th grade, I got a single horn over the summer and just kind of played around with it. The fingerings on trumpet and a B flat single horn are identical, so it's an easier transition if you are coming from trumpet. I would say if you're starting French horn as your first instrument, I think it's okay to start on double horn, but if you're coming from trumpet, it's maybe better to go to single horn. I don't know. It's honestly not that big of a difference. Did you struggle with your embouchure, and do you have tips for it? I would like more tutorials. Yeah, I absolutely did and still do struggle with my embouchure. I think it's one of those things that every horn player is gonna tell you that they have a hard time with it forever. So if anyone's not aware, embouchure is just like the word we use for like your mouth when you're playing. I personally went through hell trying to learn how to play low horn, and I discovered that a lot of the issues I was having with playing in the low register were attributed to having really bad TMJ. I grind my teeth at night, so the range of motion for my jaw is a lot smaller than it should be. Embouchure is one of those things that you're always gonna be working on. I would say some tips are practicing in the mirror is always good. Without like diagnosing what the issue is, I like to always think of like making my chin pointy. That seems to help firm up the muscles around your mouth. You can see on me really clearly, like I have super strong muscles there, but of course it takes a lot of time to grow those muscles. The last tip I'll say is I treat horn playing like it's a sport. So I treat my face muscles like I would treat any other muscles like biceps or whatever if I was lifting weights. I make sure that I have a really long, good warm up and nice long cool down. I make sure that I give my face muscles time to recover, eat a lot of protein, and try to limit my salt because that'll inflame your face a little bit. Eating more protein will help grow those muscles faster. And of course, drink more water. That'll help keep everything less inflamed and help you grow your muscles too. Carly asked a lot of really good questions. Thank you, Carly. Carly asked, what's your dream horn case? This is my case currently. It's really big. This is just like what they sent with my horn from the Alexander factory. I don't know. I've kind of been thinking about getting one of those like Wiseman opera cases, but they're so expensive. I'll put a photo up on the screen, but basically they're like carbon fiber and they're super small. This case that Alexander sent me is so big that sometimes it doesn't fit on planes, which is a huge issue. I don't know. If you have any case recommendations, please let me know. Would you rather play high horn or low horn? Like I was saying earlier, I really struggle with my low notes, so I tend to play high horn a lot more, and I tend to do way better in auditions that are for high horn jobs. I don't think I've ever advanced for a low horn job. For anyone that doesn't know, like you can either specialize in high or low horn, but realistically you have to be able to do both to do this job. But there are people who like prefer one or the other. I'm definitely like a high horn person, but I'm so jealous of the people that are really amazing low horn players because it's so hard for me, and I don't know, if you're struggling with one or the other, I totally feel your pain. It's hard to be good at both. What is your water bottle of choice? Carly, what a good question. I'm really basic. I have this Stanley. I think I would like an Awala for Christmas. What's your advice on convincing parents that music is just as important as sports? I'll be really real with you guys. I've worked a lot of jobs in my life. Every single job I've ever worked has been about 100 times easier than playing classical music. I feel like the training that classical music gives you makes you so driven for excellence that anything else you ever do is going to be easy. So basically, I think classical music trains you to know how to practice and achieve goals. Classical music can be really collaborative too. I think that's a good reason to put your kids in orchestra because they have to work together to play music. I feel like it teaches kids how to respect people in their individual roles and also how each role like contributes to a greater creation. Are you still hooked on Dune Prophecy? Yes. Please watch Dune Prophecy if you haven't already. Tuning is such a bitch on the horn. How do you improve it? Ooh, okay. My best tip for tuning is to play along with cello drones on Spotify or YouTube or wherever you get your music. Figure out whatever music you're working on, what key it's in, and then put a cello drone down in that key down. So let's say you're working on Mozart Horn Concerto number 4. You can put on a cello drone in E flat and then play the whole concerto over that drone, and it'll help you like hear that pitch relationship. What is your best advice for middle school horn players? Don't take it too seriously. Have a lot of fun with it. Play things that you like on your free time and take this with a grain of salt. A lot of band directors get mad at French horn players that are just starting out because they're missing notes. Missing notes is part of the process. I still miss notes all the time. I feel like I had a lesson with the former principal horn of the Detroit Symphony, and he said he had never had a clean performance where he didn't miss a note. And he's like one of the best, most well-known horn players in the world. So if that tells you anything, don't worry about missing notes. And if your band director gets all grumpy with you for missing notes, just don't say anything. Just let it roll over your shoulders. Don't take it personally. I think a lot of people in middle school don't realize this, but your band director had to learn all of the instruments, but they only had like a couple of weeks on each instrument. So usually they had like 2 or 3 weeks to learn French horn, and you've been playing French horn probably for longer than that. So that's not to say that they don't know what they're talking about, but the instrument itself is just a little bit more complex than most band teachers know about. And I think it's worth remembering that you chose the hardest instrument to play in the entire world. So give yourself grace, be patient with yourself, let yourself miss notes, listen to really good horn players whenever you can, and just enjoy yourself. Make sure you're having fun. Do you have any tips for live auditions? I get really nervous and shaky. Everybody's gonna tell you to just practice. I'll tell you some stuff that works that's not just like the obvious thing. Number one, drink a ton of water the night before and a ton of water the day of. Again, that'll just get rid of the inflammation in your face and make it a lot easier to play. Number two, eat a banana about 30 minutes before the audition. Bananas are kind of like a natural beta blocker, so it'll help regulate your adrenaline. If you're taking an orchestra audition and you don't know what excerpts are going to be called, what I do to practice is I assign a number to every single one of the excerpts. And then I go on Google and I find a dice roll generator. So you can put the number of excerpts. Let's say there's 20 excerpts. It'll roll a d20 and you play that excerpt, whatever number that is. The very last question is, what is the best Christmas treat? Is it bad if I say espresso martini? Espresso martini, final answer. Thank you guys so much for asking all of your questions. I know I missed a bunch. I'm so sorry, but I will definitely do this again, and I hope that helped. If you like this video and you like French horn, please subscribe. It helps me out so much. I'm trying to make YouTube my main platform in 2025, so if you like longer videos, let me know and subscribe and support the channel. I'm really worried about the TikTok ban, so I'm trying to get things going over here. But yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!